You know, there's something strange about dreamers. They don't quite fit in. They question things most people accept as unchangeable. They stare a little longer at problems everyone walks past. They obsess over ideas that seem impossible. And yet, it's those very people who end up moving the world forward. Not because they were told they could, but because they believed it so deeply, they had no choice but to try. Build up personal introspective. The truth is, every great change starts with someone a little restless, someone who saw not just what is, but what could be. A dreamer walks into a room full of doubt and still sees clarity. They see connections where others see noise. They see opportunity in the cracks of broken systems. But dreaming alone isn't enough. The world doesn't change because someone had a thought. The world changes when someone dares to act on that thought again and again, especially when it gets hard. It's your emotional resonance. When a dreamer is told it can't be done, they hear, "Prove me wrong." When they fail, and they will fail, they don't fold. They revise, they rebuild. And then they come back stronger, smarter, clearer, because the dream won't let them sleep. Every tool you use, every platform you rely on, every piece of technology that defines your life began as someone's wild, unproven idea. That's the power of one person with vision. Climax, passionate, and direct. You don't need permission to dream. You need courage to build. And you don't have to change the whole world, just change your corner of it. The ripple will take care of the rest. Conclusion, quiet confidence, call to action. So the question isn't, can a dreamer change the world? That's already been answered many times over. The real question is, will you be the next one? Dreamers challenge the status quo. They're the ones who look at what's normal and feel a quiet discomfort. While most people are content with how things are, dreamers see the cracks, the flaws, the inefficiencies that others have learned to ignore. To a dreamer, the phrase, "this is how we've always done it," is not comforting, it's a warning sign. It tells them there's complacency here, there's an assumption no one has questioned in too long. And that's exactly where they aim their focus. They're not trying to be rebellious for the sake of it, they're simply allergic to settling. Something in them refuses to let go of the idea that better is not only possible, it's necessary. Challenging the status quo takes more than creativity. It takes discomfort with comfort itself. Most people want security, they want predictability. But dreamers, they're suspicious of routines. They wonder who designed the systems we follow and whether those people were even qualified to shape them. They challenge rules not because they're defiant, but because they're curious. They ask, why does it work this way? Who decided this was the limit? What if we could push just a little further? These aren't just questions, they're sparks. Each one is a thread they pull until something begins to unravel, and in the unraveling, they see a chance to build something entirely new. They also have an unusual relationship with problems. They don't avoid them, they chase them. Where others see dead ends, dreamers see untapped opportunity. A broken system, good. That means there's space to create. An outdated method, perfect. There's room for reinvention. Even when the rest of the world adapts to dysfunction, learns to work around it, dreamers stay obsessed with the original issue. That obsession, that refusal to make do, is what leads to breakthroughs. It's not that they're smarter or luckier. It's that they are relentless in their belief that something better is not only possible, but within reach. This mindset puts them at odds with the world, and often even with the people closest to them. Challenging what's accepted doesn't always earn applause. In fact, it usually invites resistance. Friends, mentors, investors, even family, they might not see what the dreamer sees. They might urge them to follow the safer path, the proven method. But dreamers aren't motivated by approval. They're moved by vision. When everyone else is adjusting to reality, they're reshaping it. They're not bound by how things are. They're inspired by how things could be. That's why they change the world. Not because they follow it, but because they're bold enough to ask, what if we didn't? Vision on its own is beautiful, but it's not enough. The world is full of brilliant ideas that never made it past the notebook. People talk about changing industries, reshaping culture, solving global problems, but talk doesn't build products, doesn't lead teams, doesn't rewrite systems. That takes work. Dreamers may start with imagination, but they must become builders. Because vision, no matter how revolutionary, doesn't matter unless it's executed. The gap between dreaming and doing is where most potential dies. Not because the vision wasn't powerful, but because the effort required to realize it was underestimated. Execution turns possibility into proof. Ideas are fragile in the beginning. They're easy to mock, easy to dismiss. Until something gets built, until something exists, no one else can truly see what the dreamer sees. That's why action is the bridge between doubt and belief. When you build something, even a prototype, even a crude version, you give the world something it can respond to. You move the conversation from theory to reality. Suddenly, the impossible becomes tangible. That's the turning point. Not when people first hear the idea, but when they experience it in action. That's when minds begin to change. And action is rarely convenient. There are late nights when nothing seems to work. There are sacrifices, personal, financial, emotional. There are moments when quitting seems rational, but vision, when it's real, won't let you rest. It drags you back to the whiteboard, back to the sketch, back to the code, the blueprint, the pitch deck, whatever the form. Action is the test. How deeply do you believe in what you say? Are you willing to be uncomfortable, criticized, misunderstood, just to bring something new into the world? That's what separates dreamers who inspire others from those who simply inspire themselves. Every breakthrough you admire began with someone who didn't stop at the idea. They kept building while others doubted. They kept iterating while others lost interest. They showed up day after day when it wasn't cool or easy or guaranteed. The world may praise them after the success, but the real courage happened before anyone cared. That's the essence of turning vision into reality. Showing up, not for the applause, but for the process. Not just dreaming big, but doing big. That's where impact is born. Failure isn't the opposite of progress. It's part of how progress is made. Every dream worth chasing carries risk, and every risk comes with the possibility of falling short. But that doesn't make failure a dead end. It makes it a teacher. A necessary, often brutal, but deeply valuable teacher. The dreamer who fears failure will hesitate, but the dreamer who understands it will use it. Because when you fail, something critical happens, reality pushes back. You find out what doesn't work. And that knowledge, painful as it might be in the moment, is exactly what sharpens the next attempt. People who change the world have usually failed more than most. The difference is they didn't let the failure define them, they let it refine them. They didn't quit when things broke, they paid attention to why they broke. Each misstep, each wrong turn becomes a data point, a refinement of the original idea, a sharpening of instinct. This is where resilience gets built, not in the success stories, but in the quiet, frustrating, sometimes humiliating spaces where things don't go right. If you can keep moving through those moments, you're already ahead of the millions of people who stop the moment it gets hard. And here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Failure will hurt. It will test your ego. It will mess with your confidence. It will make you doubt the very thing you were once so sure about. But that discomfort, it's a sign you're in new territory. It means you're stretching, evolving, growing beyond the familiar. Staying in your comfort zone might protect your pride, but it won't create anything remarkable. Real innovation demands that you risk not just your time or your money, but your sense of certainty. And that's a high price. But for a dream worth chasing, it's worth every bruise. The world doesn't remember you for the failures you had. It remembers you for how you responded to them. Nobody asks how many prototypes it took to get to the one that changed everything. No one counts how many drafts came before the masterpiece. What people see is the final form. But the dreamer knows the truth. Behind every breakthrough is a graveyard of experiments that didn't work. That's not a sign of weakness. It's the process. If you're failing, you're trying. And if you're trying, you're already doing more than most. Perseverance is what separates the dreamers who imagine change from the ones who create it. It's easy to have a big idea. It's exciting, even addictive, to talk about bold visions and groundbreaking plans. But once the initial energy fades, once the world doesn't immediately respond, or worse, pushes back, most people stop. They interpret resistance as rejection, delay as defeat. But true dreamers are built differently. They understand that the journey will be long, uncertain, and often lonely, and they walk it anyway, not because it's easy, but because they can't ignore the idea that won't leave them alone. Persistence isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's showing up when no one's watching. It's writing the code, testing the prototype, pitching again after the 10th no, the 100th bug, the 1000th revision. It's doing the work even when it feels like nothing is moving. That's what most people miss. The quiet, invisible grind behind every success story. Persistence isn't about blind stubbornness. It's about intelligent endurance. It's about learning as you go, adjusting your path, but never letting go of your direction. It's not glamorous, but it's the one trait every world changer has in common. Obstacles aren't just possible, they're inevitable. There will be failure, there will be doubt, both from others and from yourself. There will be moments when you question everything, the vision, the timing, your capability. That's normal. What matters is what you do in those moments. Do you pause, reflect, and keep going? Or do you let the weight of uncertainty convince you to stop? Because here's the truth. The world doesn't make space for new ideas easily. You have to carve that space out yourself, one determined step at a time. And that takes stamina, mental, emotional, creative stamina. What looks like talent is often just persistence in disguise. People love to call success genius or luck, but more often it's simply the person who didn't quit. The person who kept going long after others moved on. The person who took rejection and used it as fuel. The dreamer who didn't just believe in the vision when it was new and exciting, but also when it was heavy, exhausting, and inconvenient. That kind of consistency is rare. But when you find it in someone or in yourself, you're looking at the raw material of real, lasting impact. The world doesn't change in a single sweeping moment. It shifts in small, deliberate steps. We tend to imagine world-changing ideas as grand revolutions, overnight successes, or lightning bolts of genius. But the truth is, most transformative change starts out quietly. A small tweak to an old process, a slight improvement to something we all take for granted, a tiny shift in how we think, communicate, or create. These little changes often go unnoticed at first, but over time they stack, they ripple, and they grow. What begins as a small insight or improvement can evolve into a movement, a product, a system that reshapes entire industries. Dreamers understand the value of starting small and starting now. They don't wait for perfect timing or unlimited resources. They don't get paralyzed by how far they still have to go. Instead, they focus on what they can do today. One decision, one design, one line of code, one conversation, and then they build on it. Because the first version of anything will never be perfect, but it's a beginning. And that first step, however small, has a power most people overlook. It exists, and once something exists, it can be shaped, refined, and scaled, but you can't improve what you never start. Small changes also matter because they're often the only way to begin inside complex systems. When you try to overhaul everything all at once, you hit resistance from people, from institutions, from reality itself. But when you make a small shift, you bypass some of that resistance. You find entry points. You test ideas without burning everything down. You create a proof of concept that builds confidence in you and in others. That's how progress sneaks in, through the cracks in the armor of business as usual. The most effective disruptions often don't announce themselves with a bang. They slip in, grow quietly, and then one day, they're everywhere. It's not the size of the change that matters, it's the direction it points. A 1% improvement repeated daily compounds into something massive. A single idea shared at the right time can change someone's trajectory. A minor innovation in design, workflow, or experience can redefine how we live or work. Dreamers don't wait for scale to believe in impact. They trust the process of iteration. They know the road to big change is paved with small, intentional moves. Moves that may not make headlines at first, but make all the difference over time. The power to dream isn't reserved for the gifted, the privileged, or the chosen few. It's something every one of us is born with. Too often, society treats visionaries like exceptions. We look at people who've built extraordinary things and assume they were somehow different from us. Smarter, more connected, more lucky. But that's a myth. The truth is, dreamers don't come from a single mold. They come from ordinary backgrounds, unexpected places, and often from adversity. What sets them apart isn't what they were given, it's what they refused to give up on. They simply believed that they had a right to imagine something better, and then took that belief seriously enough to act on it. You don't need a degree to dream. You don't need permission. You don't even need to have all the answers. What you need is curiosity, hunger, a sense that something inside you isn't satisfied with how things are, that restless voice that says there has to be a better way. That's where every meaningful innovation starts, with a person who listens to that voice instead of ignoring it. The tools will come, the knowledge will grow, the path will reveal itself, but only if you start walking. Dreaming isn't about having the credentials, it's about having the courage to begin without them. The danger is that people forget they still can. Life has a way of conditioning us to play small. School teaches us to follow instructions, jobs train us to repeat processes, culture encourages us to stay inside the lines. Over time, we begin to confuse structure with safety, and we trade imagination for predictability. But that spark, that creative force that questions, explores, and dreams, it doesn't disappear. It just gets buried. Real dreamers are the ones who dig it back up, who unlearn the limits they were taught, who reclaim the part of themselves that was never afraid to ask, why not? The most revolutionary thing you can do is believe your voice matters. Because once you realize that your perspective, your story, your ideas are valid, everything shifts. You stop waiting, you start building. And when people see that you're serious, they start listening. That's how movements begin. That's how change spreads. Not with some untouchable genius doing the impossible, but with someone just like you deciding they won't settle for anything less than what could be. That's the quiet, unstoppable power of a dreamer who finally says, I can.